You're listening to What It's Like with Luce, a podcast highlighting ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host Lucy Norris, and on today's episode, I'm chatting to Ireland's country director of Movember, the world's leading men's health charity focusing on tackling prostate and testicular cancer alongside mental health and suicide prevention. Working with the charity for 7 years now, non-profits were not always in this week's guest's future. Familiar with the concept of Movember through taking part as a college student, he was intrigued when he came across a job opening within the organisation and went along to the interview out of curiosity. Bowled over by the passion behind the campaign, he jumped at the chance to work with them and even cancelled a trip to Southeast Asia to begin straight away. Chatting to me about his experiences campaigning so far, why there's been a lack of awareness for men's health, and most importantly, why we should all take part in this month's activities and donate, here's what it's like to be Jack O'Connor. A quick note just before we get stuck into the interview to say I'll be running 60 kilometres throughout the month of November in support of the charity, and there'll be a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to donate or to find out how you can also get involved. Welcome, Jack. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. I think that a really great way to kick things off would be to just talk about you for a minute and chat a bit about your background and your interest in working with charities and where that came from.
Sure. So my background is in kind of events and marketing and branding. So fairly far away from the charity space. Now, I had worked with the likes of Jack Wills on their kind of marketing campaigns while I was in college. And when I was in college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then as I was kind of finishing up my final year at Trinity, I had made up my mind that I wanted to go work in mental health. I wanted to become a psychologist and eventually do my PhD in psychology. And so my plan was to head to Southeast Asia on a one-way ticket for a while, and then come back and do a postgrad in psychology. And then while I was doing my final year exams, a friend of mine, Niall, shared this role at Movember. Now I'd taken part in Movember before. I'd grown my mow and all that, but I kind of thought it was funny that he could go work for Movember. To be quite honest, I didn't really have a full understanding of the organization at that time. And so kind of more out of curiosity, I went for the interview and I met with the founders and spoke to them about the Movember journey so far, what their ambitions were for the next 10, 20 years. And I really got an insight into the impact that the guys were having, and also their approach to men's health, which is having fun, doing good, and of course changing the face of men's health. And well, look, long story short, I cancelled my trip to Southeast Asia, and I started working on the Irish Movember campaign, and this is my 7th campaign now, so it was a little over 6 years ago.
They must have made quite an impact on you to cancel that trip. That's amazing.
Like JC was one of the guys who I really clicked with. He was his ambition for men's health and the extent of the work that Movember was doing, not just in Ireland but around the world, and how many men it was helping was just really inspiring. And I really saw an opportunity to marry my experience with events and community development, marketing and campaigns, and use that skill set for something positive. And also it was connected to my long-term ambitions with psychology and mental health. So it kind of ticked a lot of boxes for me. And yes, six years later, I'm still growing mustaches.
So I'm sure that pretty much everyone knows what Movember is, because you guys do such an amazing job of growing traction for your cause. But in case anyone has never heard of Movember and doesn't know what we're talking about, can you just in a nutshell explain what it is, why it was set up, and what you guys are looking to combat with it?
Sure. So we are the world's leading men's health charity. And so what that means is we want men to live happier, healthier and longer lives. And the way that we do that is by investing in programs and initiatives in the 3 most critical points of men's health. So prostate cancer, testicular cancer, mental health and suicide prevention. And the way that we fund all of these programs is through our annual mustache growing campaign, which is obviously in November and it's called Movember, where guys all over the world grow mustaches to raise funds and awareness for our programs.
What does this charity mean to you personally as well? Because I know that when you went and spoke with them, you got a really good vibe. Obviously, it's such an amazing thing to support. But I guess what I'm wondering is why this one in particular for you?
Yeah, like as I said, I had never really thought about working for a charity before up until I found myself in that interview with the Movember guys. And I suppose what really attracted to me was obviously the mental health side of things, particularly the men's mental health side of things. Men's mental health is a tricky issue. Uh, 3/4 of suicides globally are men, and it's a really complicated problem. It's weaved into guys not talking. It's cultural, it's societal, it's generational, and so I was really interested in how the guys were going about tackling that. So that's initially what really attracted me to Movember. But as I've spent more time in the organization, I've met more people who've been affected by testicular cancer, prostate cancer, all of the cause areas. I've really grown to appreciate the full impact of the work that we're doing both here in Ireland and globally. And to be quite honest, it's given me maybe it's an element of maturity as well. It's given me an appreciation for the not-for-profit space that I really don't think that I had prior to working Movember. So now I'm looking at other organizations like working in climate change and working in a whole host of different areas that I think are really valuable. It's really opened my eyes to what you can do with your life's work when you kind of take making a massive salary out of the picture.
Yeah, for sure. I think I always admire people that work for charities or non-for-profit organizations, because I think it must be such hard work to get your message across and get people interested to support. But congrats to you for doing that, because I think it's such an amazing thing. But in terms of, so you're trying to tackle an issue which is men's health, which mustn't be easy considering the stigmas around it, and especially I feel like in a country like Ireland, I don't know if you have this opinion as well, but just in my opinion, I think we're quite conservative, and we're not so open in talking about all of these things. So when you initially started out with the charity, how did you find the experience of going out to people and trying to get them on board with what you guys were trying to do?
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting question. Movember's been called the Trojan horse of men's health, in that we lead with this mustache growing campaign that's loads of fun. We throw parties. We're not your typical charity, and I think that's why guys vibe with us. That's why people listen to us. That's why the guys listen to what we've got to say, is because we're authentic. We're a bunch of guys just like them, and I think that helps us to communicate our message. In terms of kind of the Irish society, I've found mixed reactions. There are certainly pockets of the country that are still fairly traditional in their view of men and men's health and how a man should be. But I've also come across some really open-minded groups of guys who are forward thinking and are kind of building the archetype of what the modern man could be.
And how have you seen everything change, from when you started to now? Have you seen a decrease in the stigma? Has it kind of been the same? Or what's your experience looking back on I think you said 7 years that you've been working on this campaign?
Yeah, I think there's certainly much more awareness around particularly men's mental health. A lot of people are talking about it now, which is really good. That's certainly the first step. And I think where we're at now is actually giving people the tools that they need to take the next step, which is to effectively support the people around them who might be going through a tough time, and to effectively hold the space for those people who might be struggling. And we've got a host of resources that that we can give to people for that. They're on our website and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's going in the right direction, and there's still a way to go. But all in all, I think progress is being made.
Obviously, you guys started out as a charity to combat prostate cancer and testicular cancer, but now you also focus on men's mental health. So when did that switch come about, or that addition come about, and why did that happen?
Yeah, so it was about 8 years ago that, from a global perspective, Movember started to look at men's mental health, and particularly suicide prevention among men. And the reason for this is that, as a men's health organization, as the leading men's health organization in the world, we couldn't ignore the fact that particularly suicide was becoming a largely male issue. 3/4 of suicides globally are men, and in Ireland that's fairly consistent, with 8 in every 10 suicides in Ireland being guys. So naturally that was something that caught our attention, and as an area that needed us to come in and do some work there. And as well, we have a two-way relationship with our community of Mo Bros and Mo Sisters all over the world. Were constantly telling us that it was an area that they valued and that they felt that we could help with, and so we start to develop our strategy and start rolling it out.
And your struggle, I guess, finding the balance between giving equal focus to your awareness for those cancers, and then also awareness for the mental health side of things. I know that they must overlap and interlink, but especially, say, during a time now like COVID, where men's mental health would be potentially much more of a prevalent issue because of what we're dealing with in the world. Do you ever find that sometimes the focus is taken off one area to put onto another? How do you balance both sides of those scales?
Yeah, that's a good question. So some of the cause areas have their awareness time, so to speak. So, for example, Testicular Cancer Awareness Month is in April. We've got World Suicide Prevention Day in September, and then Prostate Cancer Awareness Month is in November. Now, that said, there are 3 main cause areas, but more broadly, we encourage men to just look after their health quite generally, and that encompasses all of our cause areas and kind of everything. It encompasses being more active and being aware of their diet and not drinking too much, and just generally being healthier men. Now, we will constantly be trying to communicate about these issues year round, and the key dates that I've just outlined are really just when we zero in on one of them. But throughout the Movember campaign, what's important to remember is that with prostate cancer, the guys we're trying to get in front of are typically older men, 45, 50 onwards. And with testicular cancer, it's younger men, so 40 under. So you're communicating with different demographics. Now, when it comes to mental health, you're communicating with men across the board. And so that's something that we have certainly ramped up throughout, you mentioned COVID. Certainly throughout the lockdown, we ramped up a lot of communications about mental health, and particularly about social connections, because social connections are probably the best tool that we all have readily available to combat mental health issues. We did a piece of research a couple of years ago that identified some of the key risk factors for men's mental health, and they're things like the loss of a job, parents being sick, or the loss of a parent, breakdown of a relationship, and stresses of parenting. And all of these things have been magnified in the pandemic. People are worried about losing their job, or they have lost their job. People are worried about their parents getting COVID. People are sometimes, bickering with their partners because they're locked down together, and their kids are wrecking their heads because they're all in lockdown. And so, as I said, social connections are one of the best things that we have to help alleviate these stressors. And yet social connections are under attack with the pandemic as well, because people they're not going out for the 5-side football, they're not going to the pub, they're not meeting their friends for lunch, for coffee, they're not hanging out with people in the office. There's less social interaction. And so a big part of our campaigns throughout the summer, and indeed through the next 6 weeks, will be promoting social connectivity in a time of physical distance. And we've got some tools on our website and throughout our communications campaign that will help with that.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that whole thing of social connections in conjunction with social media, because I think it's a really interesting topic, which you could talk about for days. But I feel like there's this really interesting contrast between with social and mental health, because so much of the time people blame social media for poor mental health, but then in the same breath, it's half of the reason why these conversations are opening up. You're seeing your favorite influencers or whatever speaking about their mental health, and you guys are like what you guys have done. You've rolled out campaigns across social to get people talking in times when we can't physically be with each other. So what's your take on social media and whether or not it's a positive or negative thing in terms of mental health?
Yeah, like social media and kind of any media is really only as good as its message. So if you're constantly being bombarded by negative messaging or fake news or whatever, it's going to be a negative medium. But if we use it for something positive and we use it to get positive messages out there, messages of support, um, important information that is beneficial to people, and we use it to help people stay socially connected in a time of physical distance, then it certainly can be used as a tool for good. I think, pandemic aside, lockdown aside, what social media often becomes is the highlight reel of people's lives, and almost like a status signaling thing that, if all you do is scroll through people's highlights reel, um, and it's not going to leave you feeling particularly good about what you're up to, particularly if you're sitting on the couch doing nothing. And envy can sit in. And what I think is important for people to remember is that that is, the social media is the highlight reel. It's not what people are doing day in, day out. you know doesn't People don't show warts and all on social media. I'm sure some people do, but quite generally I think it's a highlight reel.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's so easy to forget that, the majority of people are not going to post pictures where they don't feel like they're looking their best, or, when
Yeah.
they're crying or whatever. So, yeah, it's just interesting to hear your take on that from your charity's point of view as well. And then obviously, you mentioned COVID there, and we spoke a little bit about it before we started recording, but your campaign is rolling out in the middle of our lockdown 2.0, or whatever you want to call it. So I would be wondering how you guys are feeling about that, but then also how you're expecting it to go in terms of, raising funds, because, there might be some financial strain on everyone at the moment. Are you expecting things to decrease in that sense, or what's your feeling going into it?
Yeah, so just taking into account the broader economic impact of the pandemic, we've we've dipped our targets and our expectations in terms of funds raised. Now that said, I've been really inspired by the amount of support we've received so far. We're tracking really well in terms of people signing up for the campaign. Um, Obviously, I said earlier on, this is a 6-week campaign. We're in lockdown for all 6 of them, so it's going to be an interesting one. But it's been really heartwarming to see the people join the campaign, and in spite of everything, gravitate towards something that's positive, a movement for good, a movement for change. So yeah, I right now I'm feeling quite positive about it. We've been doing everything we can to deliver a lockdown-proof and impactful campaign. So I really hope that we can do that.
Yeah, definitely. And then can you talk more about the campaign that you're rolling out this month? I know that I think you have 4 ambassadors. Sorry if I'm wrong about that. And yeah, just the process behind that and what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of media ambassadors on board: Darren Kennedy, Lawson and Pame, and Harry McNulty. We've also got Pat Tivley out in Galway, and Dara Stewart down in Cork. And then we've got corporate ambassadors, or workplace ambassadors all over the country, community ambassadors, and we have student ambassadors. So we have ambassadors in as many pies as we can get our hands on. I suppose the campaign is primarily going to be built around mustaches as it usually is. So what we're asking people to do is on the 30th of October to share a picture of themselves shaving down on their social media pages. Here we are using social media for something good.
Yeah.
To share a picture of them using or shaving down on the 30th, and to nominate 5 of their friends to join them on their mustache growing journey. And we're hoping to really kickstart things that way. And then throughout the month, we've got a couple of things planned. We've got our launch event is with Bingo Loco, and that's obviously a virtual launch. And we're looking at seeing various different pieces of content throughout the month with some surprises along the way. So yeah, look, it's all coming together. And as I said, I've been really inspired by the support we've received so far.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be quite an exciting month for you guys, and I hope that it all goes well as well. And so I guess moving back to the cancer side of things, what have you found is the primary reason why people won't go and get checked?
Yeah, so it's an important thing to address. Typically amongst us guys, we're not very good at going to the doctor.
Yeah.
It's called help-seeking behavior. We often play the ostrich. We stick our head in the sand and we hope things go away, which is really not the best strategy when it comes to cancer or indeed mental health. But particularly with cancer, if you notice you've got that something's not right, so it could be a problem with your urination, it could be a lump in your testicle, it could be issues with your erections, or a whole host of different things. But if you notice one of those things and you kind of you ignore it, you just hope it goes away, you know, you could be delaying a point of diagnosis. And when it comes to cancer, the earlier we can detect these things, the earlier we can get a diagnosis in place, the better chance we have of mitigating side effects, not only surviving, but living well and fulfilled post-cancer. And also it gives you more options. So it's super important that people are aware of this, and that they take action as soon as they notice something could be off.
How have you found your campaign resulting in terms of getting younger men to go and get checked? Is it more challenging than getting older men to get checked, or is it an equal balance?
I think the younger guys are maybe a little bit more adaptive to the campaign. I think when they see it, they tend to engage with it. The more senior gentlemen are often a little bit more set in their ways, and it can be harder to change their behaviour. But through our campaigns, I think we're making a difference, and as well, through the guys and the girls who support the Movember campaign, our Mo Bros and our Mo Sisters, if we can get through to them, they can get in touch with their dads, their granddads, their uncles, and even if those guys might not have engaged in the campaign to the same extent, if we can get through to anybody, they can have a conversation with the men who might be at risk, and we can impact them that way. It's certainly having an impact. I've had people who got in touch and have said that in November they decided they were going to check their testicles because of the campaign, and they caught testicular cancer. And I've had other people who, because of our campaign, went to the doctor and got a PSA test, which is the initial screening for prostate cancer, and they caught their prostate cancer really early and were able to have an early intervention and avoid some of the more nasty side effects. So all of these things are success stories from our perspective.
Yeah, it must be incredible to get that feedback, to know that, your campaign has essentially saved someone's life. And have you noticed that COVID has impacted on even people's thought process of whether or not they're able to go and get checked, or are checks not as readily available as they were before? Or how have you noticed the virus impacting the ability to go and look after your health when it's not got to do with the virus, if that makes sense?
I don't have any data on this, but I've got some anecdotal stories, and I've spoken to some doctors about this, and a lot of them are foreseeing a future surge in lately diagnosed cancers, because they feel that a lot of people might not be going into hospitals and might not be going to get things checked out. because of the pandemic. So I think it's certainly something to be considerate of. But I don't have any hard data to point to, so it's hard to say for sure. But yeah, I think it's absolutely having an impact. Yeah, 100%. And as well, another one is the overall strain on the health service, and the ability for them to fulfill treatments and surgeries and stuff. I'm sure all of that stuff has been made more complicated and slowed down with everything that's been going on. So it's had an impact in many different ways.
Yeah, it's kind of a dangerous time when you think of it from that perspective, because I feel like you definitely think twice about going, for maybe something that in your head at the minute is not that urgent in comparison with the virus. So it's definitely something I think that maybe they need to be a bit more vocal about, the fact that you can still go and get your checks and things. They're operating as normal, not to ignore it if you find something.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully our campaign can get that message across.
I guess just to wrap everything up, do you have a highlight from your time working on the campaign? Maybe, I don't know, some event that you particularly enjoyed, or some story that came across your desk that really impacted you, or anything like that?
Oh, that's a tough question. It's been so long as well. There's been so many stories of people that have really impacted me. There's been some mad experiences as well. I remember there was one year I was at the ploughing championships, and I was asked to give a men's health talk, and I was like, okay, cool, let's do this. And they brought me into the livestock ring where they auction off the animals, and I was in there with a microphone. I looked behind me, this big massive TV screen that was projecting across the whole festival. That was super mad. But in terms of impact, like it's very hard to say. We've had some great times with the fire brigade, and the guards as well. I had the pleasure of going down to Templemore, the Garda College, and meeting some of the students who support us down there, and some of the sergeants, to speak to them about the campaign. That was really good fun. I think quite generally, we run the campaign on a shoestring here, and we're fairly tight for resources. And in November, it's very difficult to get FaceTime with everyone. But in the springtime, I do a thank you tour, and I get to go around the country and meet all the people, all the teams, and who supported us. And I think that's my favorite time of the year every year, because you get to express your gratitude, and you get to spend some quality time with the people who've engaged with the campaign, engaged with the message, and have helped us achieve our goals, and who help us to do our work. That's always, I think, the most enjoyable part of what we do for me.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I'm sure you've had some crazy times over the years working with this. Looking from your guys' social media, you definitely always take such an original, I guess, kind of, cool is such a bad word to use, but take on campaigning, which I really enjoy to interact with and to see. So congrats to you guys, and best of luck with Movember. I'm sure it'll be a massive success, and I just want to say thank you so much for giving up your time to talk to me and to tell us all more about why we should be supporting this incredible cause. So thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you so much for listening, and as always, please rate, share, and leave a comment if you like what you hear. And don't forget to follow @WhatIt'sLikePod on Instagram and Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. To find out more about how you can get involved with Movember and to donate, visit the links provided in the show notes. I'll be back on Thursday with more inspiring stories, but for now, this has been What It's Like with Luce.